Good morning, my friends. Um, so today I'm being guided to focus on the topic of mental health. Um, I feel like on one hand, humanity is really experiencing a lot more mental health problems than in the past. And for some reason, it's still being very much neglected by society. Um, but of course, I feel that there is a trend to it, a descending trend, as I see more and more people engaging on their devices and increasingly being dissociated from reality, especially younger generations, but not necessarily. I mean, I have friends who are my age and are pretty much on their phones most of the time. And so obviously, I did share in a previous video um, that I suffer from bipolar disorder, and it's something that I've been dealing with since I was 23 years old. I was lucky enough to get diagnosed pretty early on, and unfortunately wasn't on the right medication only until recently, and that created a lot of problems for me, but I didn't know. I was being advised to change my medication, but I didn't really want to. And so I did experience um, having, what's it called? Sorry. Well, just going into a mental hospital against my own will. I can't remember the English word for it. And it was a terrible, terrible experience. Possibly one of the worst experiences. No one really knows what happens behind closed doors, but it's very humiliating as a human being to have to go through that. And as soon as you get out, you kind of just want to put it all behind you. But I mean, the level of abuse that people like myself have to go through, it's just unreal. And everyone is like, well, you need your meds, you need to get to be sedated, unless you are capable of handling your own outbursts of anger or whatever it is, then you need to be heavily sedated, you need to be cured by the professionals. But really, what is happening is that you enter a place that has absolutely zero sympathy or empathy or compassion for you. And I have the worst kind of memories of being lied down on, a bed against my will, being pushed down, being injected with all sorts of things, nurses being really nasty to me, or even thinking that I was making up the fact of having cancer, which I actually did have at the time, but they thought that I was just being psychotic in saying that. And I just thought it's disgusting. People think, oh, but they the crazy houses don't exist anymore, and people just go into hospitals or rehabs, and as if that was some kind of solution to every problem, except it isn't. They just deal with the emergency of the moment and try to get you back on your feet. And as soon as you have been sedated long enough that you kind of calm down and are ready to re-enter society, that happened fairly quickly in my case. It would only take like a week or so, but there were people spending months in there, and that kind of constant daily abuse is unreal and is unacceptable, and I can't believe that nobody talks about it. Like, nobody is concerned with what really is going on in these places, and it's just astonishing. Like, everyone now, it seems to only to be concerned with people who are, of a different sexual orientation or transgender, or who are fluid and don't know what they are, and that seems to be the main topic. But what about the mental suffering that so many people are going through, and often in silence, without even expressing what they're going through? I've shared obviously my own experience with my ex who died recently, and he was, well, I don't think he was an alcoholic, but I do think that he abused alcohol, and drugs. He was obviously heavily depressed, anxious, and isolated, living in the UK. And I mean, it's not even like we're talking about third world countries. God only knows what happens in those places. But this is actually in Europe. And, I don't understand why his doctor or the few people who he was seeing for his meds or whatever, didn't put him on some kind of watch. Because he must have been suicidal. Somebody must have understood how bad he was doing. Like, his best friend told me he didn't even leave the house at all for like months. He just had his food delivered, his meds delivered. And this was like a really healthy guy. Like, he was really into his sports. He loved to cycle, he loved running. He was just very athletic. He didn't mind the occasional drink, but he definitely wasn't a drinker when we were together. And he had suffered some traumatic events in his childhood, which he never really recovered from. And then, from what I gathered, he ended up marrying someone who must have been really abusive to him, verbally or whatever, just chipped away his self-esteem, because already in the interactions we had towards the end of his life, even if I hadn't spoken to him for the last 2 years or so, yeah, he had turned into a completely different person. Like, I could see through his hurt and still see that beautiful person that he was, but at the same time, he could easily turn really nasty. And say really nasty comments. It just wasn't him. It was just out of character. And he was just very good at hiding it. So the impression I have is that not his family of origin. I mean, he didn't have his parents, but like his sisters, his old friends, like none of them knew the extent to which his suffering was happening. And yeah, I just can't believe that in 2023, in a civilized country, these things are still happening and these people are passing away for no good reason. I mean, of course, yeah, you can tell me it was his destiny. He probably like couldn't deal with the suffering anymore. All those things are true and are valid and remain true. But what is unacceptable for me is just the amount of neglect that is happening worldwide. Um, with regards to mental health disorders. And especially, I think, post COVID, like things have gone a lot worse. And a lot of people have just retracted in their own bubble. And it's all well and good as long as you're doing fine. But if you're really struggling like he was and not reaching out to anyone, and I have that tendency too. I mean, I am lucky enough to be supported, in my own world through my husband, my family, my friends. But I would have potentially the same tendency to self isolate, to medicate myself with alcohol. God knows, like, how many times I tried to do that in the past. Every time I felt uncomfortable, not at ease with people in social situations at work, in social circumstances at work, I would just drink because it just felt so uncomfortable to me. And I was constantly watching out for what people were saying, constantly being paranoid of, what things could express people would express about me. I don't know, it was just like a loop that I could never get out of. And even when I decided to tell people that I am bipolar, that didn't make things better, because it's almost like people don't care. They're just like, oh well, she's a bitch, she's like having her issues, and and it's not, people are not gonna stop behaving like they normally would just because you told them that you have, unless you're in an environment where they actually understand where you're coming from. So of course, if I go to my center for mental health, that I go to see my doctors and nurses and whatever, they know the amount of anxiety, of stress, of struggle to just pretend that you're okay to lead a normal life, when in reality, inside of you, it's a battlefield. And it's really hard to put that shield or that mask up for everyone to see and pretend that, oh, but it's okay, like I can still do all the normal things. I can still get married, I can still get a career, I can still do these things. Yeah, of course you can, but at the same time, it's just not an easy road. And if you have no one, like my ex, if you have no one, then it just becomes an impossible mission. I truly believe that. With no support, there is no way out. And it's easy for us to say, oh, but he didn't ask for support. He didn't want people. Of course he did. Of course he did. Everybody wants support. Everybody wants help. Everybody wants to get out of their mess. It's just that when you've been with yourself too long to convince yourself that you're just a burden to yourself and everyone else, then nothing else matters. Then you just want out. You just want to free yourself and free others from the burden of your existence. I know that very well. That's inevitable, and God knows how many people feel like that right now, and who don't have anyone, and who are probably going to end up this way. And it's such a shame, because it's a waste of a life that could have been lived differently. So I don't know. I mean, I've always wanted to speak out about these matters, and at the same time, I felt almost ashamed to, or not really wanting to put myself out there. But I don't think this can be neglected anymore. I mean, I must have experienced all of this for a reason. And even if I can just get to my message across to a few other people who actually care, who actually listen, that's all really that matters. Because there are plenty of people, brilliant people, doctors and scientists and psychiatrists who have, I've seen it like amazing TEDx talks and explaining all the wonders of what goes on in the psychotic mind, and or really genius people explain what it feels like to be bipolar and all of that. But that's all well and beautiful, that we can have such a fascination for this kind of disease that is also perceived as being kind of very creative, almost genius, and but the other side of the coin is that you can be really in despair. You can completely lose sight of who you are, of what your life means to you, of what you want out of life. Like, how much am I entitled to follow my own dreams and aspirations just because other people tell me that I'm not good enough to be entitled to having them in the first place? Almost as if, oh, but you're struggling with this, so you just need help. You just need to go with what other people tell you, what your doctors tell you, what your nurses tells you, what your husband tells you. And of course, when I'm struggling, it makes total sense because you need that help, you need that guidance from others. But then at the same time, I've also been wanting to be much more of a free spirit than I've been allowed to be. Um, I have this thing that sometimes I just want to break free of society rules and obligations, and I'd be like, oh, let me just quit my job even if I don't have another one lined up, or let me get out of this marriage, or let me, just because sometimes I feel like I'm fucking chained to I don't even know what, and it's not what my spirit wants. My spirit wants to be free and independent, and I can't do that. And I haven't allowed myself to do that because every time I felt incredibly guilty for it and immediately retracted to, oh no, I need to keep this job because what am I going to do? Or, no, I need to stay in this marriage because this person loves me and I'm a crazy horse and where am I going to go? But really, why do we have to live life like that? I don't know. But anyway, that's a different topic. What is really relevant, I think, right now is that we start being honest with ourselves and really being honest as well with our own struggles and with the struggles of other people. Stop pretending that it's what the media wants from us, all this attention on topics that to me are irrelevant. I frankly don't give a fuck about the fact that young people are fluid or homosexual or whatever. Who gives a shit? I mean, it's their choice, whatever. It's like yeah, of course society needs to be free and understanding. I get that. Like no one needs to be judged, but then again, I feel like I'm being judged all the time. And not necessarily because I'm judging myself, but because others are judging me even for having exposed myself. Now, the place where I work for is so happy and has publicized both internally and externally um, their inclusivity new policy. And they hired two refugees, which is wonderful. It's absolutely wonderful. It's absolutely relevant. But at the same time, just by talking to people, I know there are others like me. Okay, maybe they're not officially bipolar or depressed or whatever, but they're still struggling and nobody gives a fuck. Nobody gives an absolute fuck. And obviously, the worst case scenario is like in the case of my ex, where you're completely neglected from everyone else and you're just basically left to die. And people are going to say, oh, well, it was his fate. Oh, well, not he deserved it, but he attracted it by his own behavior and faults and whatever. No, guys, it's it's not like that. It's not. we're just wanting and needing help. And when you don't get it, then you might as well be dead. So this is my message for the day. I'm sorry if it's a little bit on the heavy side, but I think we really ought to be, at least I'm trying to be more authentic with myself and others, and this seems like a good way to do so. So yeah, do share with me if you want to, if you feel like it, your own thoughts or your own struggles. And until next time, thank you for listening.